Okay, so you have to start the recording. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to have this short podcast with you. We're going to talk about some topics that we have covered during the first module. As you know, we're going to mention several things about code. That is how we apply technology in our classes, right? So, Sylvie, can you start, please?
Yes, good evening, everyone. I would like to share with you some important facts about the history of code. In 1997, Michael Levy defined a computer-assisted language learning code as a study of application of the computer in language teaching and learning. Nowadays, it is used to design and present the multimedia material. But did you know the application of technology is not a recent event? The reason was that in 1950s, computer-assisted instruction was first used more generally in physics and mathematical learning theory, so at Stanford University. So, however, in 1980, Colette applied code to his university mainframe for computer-assisted instructions in French program. From there were programs like Plato and Clef were used for language instructions. So, therefore, these facts allow me to think about the traditional class that used to have when I was in a high school student, because most teachers used to have their devices like the radio CD to reproduce over and over again some listening activities and just for completing sentences and repeat pronunciation. What about you, Joc?
Well, I can tell you, Sylvia, that regarding communicative code, teachers should consider that this approach is mainly focused on the intrinsic motivation of students, as well as the use of forms through conversations and written tasks. Personally, I used these approaches in the past. Basically, when I had the pandemic issue, I had to learn how to use Zoom, and I created groups to have my students practice the questions in conversations, and also the written tasks through Padlets and interaction in which they had to type to each other some messages. And regarding cognitive code, we have to focus on the cognitive part of the student, which is based on the process on which the student acquires a language and also the force skills. And in this case, I can use task-based learning, which is something beneficial for them. And in my case, I use this example of written a letter to a person who it was imaginary, but this person had to write the problem and they had to write the solutions. That's the way I can reflect on these two approaches. What about you, Natalie?
Okay, thank you, Hope. Now, talking about the structural behavioral approach to code, well, it's mainly focused on grammar, vocabulary, drills, and repetition, yes? And what the computer is seen as a tutor and as a model. The advantage is that the computer provides immediate feedback, positive or negative feedback to the learner. Now, how do we apply this in our classroom? Basically, we can have special tools like the ones that come with the book, the platform, in which we have a division on grammar, vocabulary, speaking, and listening, in which students mainly have to repeat some activities and they will have immediate feedback and they know in which way they have to practice. Also, we have some web tools like, for example, Learning Chocolate and also Agenda Web. Now, talking about the cognitive one is based on constructivism. And now here, students need to create their own learning. Now, how do we apply it with technological tools? For example, we can apply it on the way that they need to create mind maps with Genially, or forms with platforms like Moodle or Google Forms or Teams, in which they will have open questions and they will have a language input from the computer.
Okay, now in the socio-cognitive approach, this basically means that we can have interaction with other users with the use of the computer and obviously with the use of the internet. Now, this is one of the most recent examples that we can have of this approach, which is what we have here, the use of a platform, in this case Zoom, to interact with other users. We also have other platforms like Microsoft Teams and Google Meets that most teachers use. But also in the socio-cognitive approach, the main objective that we have here is that users can reshape or reconstruct in the case of text. Okay, so this type of programs helps with this approach. Moving on into the issues that we can have with CALL. First, we're going to look at the models that we have. One of the most common and we can say oldest used is a computer-supported classroom, hybrid teaching, and completely online courses, which is what we can say that we're using at the moment for our master program. I think that this type of program, this type of model is very popular nowadays because of the pandemic, that many people use it now.
Okay, thank you so much, Mike, for your ideas. Now, a little bit just to sum up what you already mentioned, I have to talk about CALL software and resources on internet. As you know, in the past, more or less in the 1960s, technology was not as sophisticated as it is nowadays. We can mention that technology can be now more than just an extra tool. There we also can include all the necessary resources for students to develop all their necessary knowledge to produce a second or third language, right? You know that also as practitioners, we as teachers and students have to learn how to develop different ways to produce all the activities that they need on different platforms. For example, we as teachers need to manage different platforms like Moodle, Google Classroom, or probably YouTube and different things. And also students have to learn how to upload their necessary resources, all the material that they have to check, how to join different ways in platforms and several things like that. So that was just this part to sum up how the software resources work and how practitioners need to improve their technological knowledge to be part of this kind of lessons.
Okay, so that's very good, Maria Augusta. So please, could you tell me, how do you manage boredom in online learning?
Okay, as you know, before pandemic, students thought that learning online was not possible. And because of COVID, we have to learn how to deal with this. We as teachers and students have to manage this new way of acquiring knowledge. So I consider that at the beginning it was kind of boring because we didn't have all the necessary tools. But after learning how to improve our lessons, maybe including videos, games like Kahoot or quizzes, are very useful in order to catch the attention of the students. Also providing them different tools, for example, the use of live worksheets or things like that to share their experiences and use meaningful language. Okay.
Okay, now a lot has been said about teaching online, but we haven't focused on how teachers do this. So, Hog, I have a question for you. Do you consider that your teaching beliefs will affect when teaching online?
I personally believe that my teaching beliefs do affect my online teaching as well, because this is due to some scientific evidence that proves that the teachers have a long-lasting impact on students' learning process. And these studies, we could also see that the teachers are affected by the technology as well, in the sense that they are emotionally discouraged because they feel frustrated, and also I think this is the way that they can facilitate their learning process, but sometimes they struggle with that. That's why I think this does affect their learning process and teaching as well.
Okay, Mike, I have a question for you. Now, focusing a little bit in the Ecuadorian context, I want you to think about how institutes manage their income. You know, sometimes it is not enough, or maybe it's not focused on technological resources for students. And sometimes this lack of technology can be a problem. What would you do to make a change on this issue?
Well, I think that obviously our culture, our context is very different from other countries. And I think that with the small amount of resources and technology that we have, we must use the max. We have to do everything we can to make sure that first, the resources that we use are going to be effective with the students, because we don't have that many resources. So we need to make sure that we can use them as much as we can. And thank you very much. That is our time for today's podcast. Hope you have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.